My name is Lorraine June Whitaker, and I am 78 years old. I grew up in a small Tennessee town where summers smelled like honeysuckle and winters were warmed by wood stoves. I spent most of my life as a nurse, caring for other people's loved ones while raising a son of my own. For decades, I believed the things my mother taught me. Family comes first, blood is thicker than water, and if you give your best, it will come back to you. I carried those beliefs like scripture. But standing in that airport, I realized scripture can burn. It was a Tuesday morning, just weeks after I buried my husband. I stood alone inside Nashville International, holding nothing but my purse and a thin sweater. No suitcase, no return ticket, no family by my side. My son, Mark, and his wife had already walked away, their luggage clicking across the tiles like punctuation marks on the end of a sentence I didn't know was being written.
You'll figure it out, Mom.
I looked down at my boarding pass. My name wasn't listed for the return trip. The paper shook in my hand, already damp with sweat. Around me, the airport buzzed. Announcements, rolling bags, children laughing. But inside me, there was only silence. Final call for Flight 228 to Orlando. The loudspeaker blared. That was their flight, their family trip. The trip I had sold my last piece of jewelry to help pay for. My knees wobbled, my breath hitched. I sat down on a cold bench at gate B22, and for the first time in my life, I felt disposable, not forgotten. Forgotten is an accident. This was planned. My hand brushed against something at the bottom of my purse. A thin envelope, yellowed with age. The handwriting faded, but still familiar. My husband's handwriting. It read, "For the day you stand alone." My pulse quickened. I slid it into my lap, my fingers trembling as I opened it. And what I found inside changed everything. The envelope sat heavy in my lap, but before I could even bring myself to look inside, my mind drifted back to the days when I still felt like someone's treasure instead of their burden. For 42 years I was Mrs. Whitaker, wife to Henry, a man whose laugh could fill a room and whose hands always smelled faintly of cedar wood. We built our life together in a modest farmhouse just outside Murfreesboro. We had one son, Mark. I remember the night he was born, how Henry held him up and whispered, "This boy will never know what it feels like to be left alone." And I believed him. For decades, I believed we were raising a son who understood loyalty, who understood love. But death has a way of changing the stories families tell themselves. Henry passed 2 months ago. A stroke, sudden and cruel, took him on an ordinary Tuesday morning while he was pouring his coffee. One moment he was humming an old Johnny Cash song. The next he was slumped against the counter, his favourite mug shattered at his feet. Just like that, 42 years of partnership ended, leaving me in a house too big, too quiet, too empty. Mark came around a few days after the funeral with Tanya, his wife. Tanya didn't cry. She just wrinkled her nose at the casserole dishes stacked on my counter and said, "You shouldn't be alone in this big house all day, Lorraine. It's depressing." Mark nodded, eyes darting anywhere but my face. "Mum," he said, "we think you should come on a trip with us, just to get away for a bit. Clear your head." A trip. The word hung in the air like a lifeline. I hadn't left Tennessee in years. I thought of ocean air, of sunshine, of being around my grandchildren. I thought of belonging. "But flights are expensive right now," Tanya added quickly, her manicured hand sliding over Mark's arm. "We're all pitching in. Everyone has to contribute." I didn't hesitate. I went to my bedroom, opened the top drawer of my dresser, and pulled out the velvet box holding Henry's last gift to me, a delicate pearl necklace. He had given it to me on our 40th anniversary, smiling shy as a schoolboy when I unwrapped it. I kissed him that night and whispered, "I'll never take it off." But I did. I carried it to a pawn shop 2 streets over and sold it. My heart cracked as I handed it across the counter, but I told myself it was for family, for healing, for love. The night before the trip, I packed a small carry-on with care. I even tucked Henry's framed photo between my sweaters, thinking he'd want to be part of this healing getaway. I believed I was still part of something. But standing in that airport, staring at my erased return ticket, I realized the truth. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was just part of their budget. And as I sat there holding that envelope in my lap, I wondered, had Henry known this day would come? Is that why he left it for me? I pulled the flap open slowly. Inside, folded twice, was a stack of crisp $100 bills, and underneath the money, a small white card with a name printed across it, a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. The envelope felt almost alive in my hands, as if Henry himself had slipped it into my purse that morning. I pulled the bills out slowly, 10 of them, crisp and neat, enough to cover more than a bus ticket. My chest tightened with relief, but it was the card beneath that made my breath truly stop. The card read, Richard Wade, Attorney at Law, Jefferson Street, Murfreesboro. I hadn't seen Richard in years, not since Henry and I drew up our first will. He was one of Henry's oldest friends, a man who had played poker with him in their younger days, the kind of friend who always signed off letters with, "If you ever need me, Lorraine, just call." I had tucked the card away, never expecting to use it. But here it was, resurfacing when my world had been stripped bare. I stared at it, my hand trembling. Around me the airport bustled on, families hurrying toward Disney vacations, couples wheeling bags plastered with stickers from places I'd never seen. No one looked at me twice. No one knew that an old woman was sitting on a bench, trying to decide whether she had enough strength left to fight. Part of me wanted to crumble, to curl up right there at gate B22 and let the tears come, to accept that my son had chosen a life where I didn't matter. But another part of me, the part Henry had always admired, began to stir. I pressed the card against my chest. For the day you stand alone. That's what Henry had written. Maybe he'd known. Maybe he'd seen something in Mark and Tanya that I refused to admit. I looked up at the departure board. Their flight to Orlando had just switched from boarding to departed. They were gone, off to palm trees and poolside cocktails, while I was left behind like forgotten luggage. But I wasn't forgotten. Not by Henry, and not by myself. I rose to my feet, clutching the envelope tight, and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the airport. Outside, the humid Tennessee air hit me, thick and heavy.
Yellow cabs lined up along the curb. One driver leaned out his window. "Where to, ma'am?"
I looked down at the card one more time. My lips moved before my fear could stop them. 287 Jefferson Street, I said. The law office of Richard Wade. The driver nodded, loading my purse into the back seat. As I sank onto the worn leather seat, my heart pounded with something I hadn't felt in months. Not fear, not grief, determination. And deep down, a whisper of revenge. The cab smelled faintly of pine-scented air freshener and fried food. I sat stiffly in the back seat, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. My reflection in the window startled me. Thin lines carved deeper around my mouth, eyes dull with sleeplessness, hair that had once been Henry's pride, now limp and grey. For a moment I thought, this is what being left behind looks like. The drive to Jefferson Street was short, but in my mind it stretched forever. Every stoplight felt like a pause where I might lose my nerve. What was I doing? Walking into a lawyer's office with nothing but a crumpled business card and a broken heart. But then I pictured Tanya's smirk, the way she'd said, "You'll figure it out, Mum." I pictured Mark turning away, too cowardly to even meet my eyes, and I straightened my spine. The cab pulled up in front of a brick building with peeling paint and a faded sign, Wade and Associates, Attorneys at Law. It looked tired, but steady, like me. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and coffee gone cold. A young receptionist glanced up from her desk.
"Can I help you, ma'am?"
"My name is Lorraine Whitaker. I need to see Richard Wade."
"Do you have an appointment?"
"No, but tell him Henry Whitaker's widow is here." Out stepped Richard himself, older now, heavier around the middle, but with the same steady eyes I remembered.
"Lorraine, good Lord, it's been years. I was so sorry to hear about Henry."
The sound of Henry's name cracked something inside me. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Thank you. I wouldn't be here if I didn't need help."
"Then you came to the right place. Tell me what's going on."
"I want to change my will, immediately. My son and his wife are not to receive a single thing from me."
"Lorraine, you know this is a big step. Are you sure?"
I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And for the first time since Henry died, I felt like I was no longer just surviving. I was beginning to fight. Richard listened in silence as I told him everything. My hands shook as I spoke, but once I started, the words poured out like water from a cracked dam. I told him about the night Henry died, about the way the house had become a cavern of silence. I told him how Mark had come to me with Tanya, how they'd suggested the trip, as though it was some act of kindness. I told him about pawning Henry's necklace, about how much it hurt to hand it over for money that wasn't even for me. And then I told him about the airport, the single ticket, the erased return, Tanya's smirk, and Mark's silence. Richard's jaw tightened. His pen hovered above the paper, but didn't move. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. When I finally stopped talking, my throat raw, Richard leaned back in his chair. He folded his hands across his stomach and let out a slow breath.
Lorraine, I wish I could say I was surprised.
I blinked. What do you mean?
He studied me carefully, then lowered his voice. Henry used to worry about Mark. He told me once, years back, that he feared your boy was too easily swayed, too eager to impress the wrong kind of people. I never said anything because Henry asked me not to.
My stomach clenched. Are you saying Henry knew that Mark could do something like this?
Richard hesitated, then gave a small, sad nod. He didn't predict this exactly, but he worried. He said, "If I go first, make sure Lorraine's protected. That's why I gave him my card."
Tears filled my eyes. I'd spent weeks wondering if Henry had truly seen me, if he'd prepared me for this moment. Now I knew he had.
I wiped my face with the corner of my sleeve. Then help me protect myself. Help me make sure Mark and Tanya never touch a dime of what Henry and I built.
Richard leaned forward again, his voice firm. "We can do that. We'll start with your will. But, Lorraine..." He paused, his brow furrowing. "There's something else you need to know about your son. Something I've heard, unofficially."
My heart skipped. What is it?
Richard's eyes darkened. "He's in debt, Lorraine. Serious debt. And I'm afraid this trip of his may have been about more than just abandoning you."
The word debt echoed in my ears like a gunshot. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My son, my only child, the boy Henry and I had raised with lullabies and Sunday dinners and scraped together tuition checks, drowning in debt. Richard slid his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose.
"I don't know the exact amount, but I've heard it's bad. Gambling mostly, poker games, sports bets, and he owes the wrong people, Lorraine. Not banks, men who don't take later for an answer."
I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. Gambling? Mark, the same boy who once cried when he lost his toy truck behind the barn. The same boy Henry carried on his shoulders at the county fair, buying him cotton candy with the last dollar in his wallet.
I shook my head. No, not Mark. He's a father now. He's got responsibilities.
Richard's voice was low but steady. "Responsibilities don't stop a man in debt. Sometimes they make him more dangerous."
A chill ran through me. Suddenly, everything at the airport clicked into place. The eagerness for me to sell Henry's necklace, Tanya's sharp insistence that everyone contributes, the way Mark avoided my eyes. They hadn't wanted me there for company. They'd wanted my money.
My stomach twisted. So leaving me behind wasn't an accident.
Richard hesitated, then met my gaze. "I can't say for sure, but if they're desperate, Lorraine, then yes, maybe they thought you'd be easier to discard."
Discard. The words sliced through me like glass. My own son, weighing me like luggage too heavy for the trip. My son, willing to leave me stranded, maybe worse, just to dig himself out of the hole he'd dug. Tears blurred my vision, but behind them, a fire sparked. If Mark thought I was weak, if Tanya thought I was disposable, they had both forgotten whose blood ran in my veins. Henry's blood, my blood.
I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. Then help me, Richard. Help me cut them off before they bleed me dry.
He nodded, his jaw tight. "We will. But Lorraine, if Mark is in as deep as I think, this won't just be about inheritance. You need to be careful. Very careful."
I swallowed hard. Outside the office window, a storm was brewing, clouds rolling dark and heavy over Murfreesboro. For the first time in my life, I felt it deep in my bones. I wasn't just fighting for dignity anymore. I might be fighting for survival. When I left Richard's office that afternoon, the storm had broken. Rain pelted down in sheets, plastering my hair to my forehead as I climbed into another cab. The envelope felt lighter now, though the money was still there. What weighed on me wasn't paper, it was the truth. My son was drowning, and he was willing to use me as his lifeboat. The cab rolled slowly through the flooded streets, and I pressed my forehead to the cool glass. For the first time in weeks, though, I didn't feel powerless. Richard's words had lit a flame inside me. I wasn't going to sit quietly in my empty house waiting for Mark and Tanya to carve away what little I had left. No, I would fight. By the time I reached home, the storm had eased into a soft drizzle. I stepped into the living room, the silence greeting me like an old friend. Henry's photo still sat on the mantel, his smile steady, his eyes kind. I walked over, touched the glass and whispered, "I'm doing what you wanted. I'm protecting us." That night I brewed a pot of chamomile tea and sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For the first time since Henry died, I felt something close to peace. Fragile, but real. And then the phone rang. The sound pierced the quiet, shrill and demanding. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver. Almost no one called anymore. My friends were either gone or too frail. Mark rarely dialed unless he needed something.
Slowly I picked it up. Hello?
A pause, just the sound of breathing on the other end.
Then a voice, low, unfamiliar, with a hint of menace. "Mrs. Whitaker?" "Yes. Who is this?" Another pause, then, "Tell your son the clock's ticking. He's out of time, and if he can't pay—" The voice trailed off into a laugh, sharp and humorless. "Who is this? What do you want?"
But the line went dead. I stood there, the receiver trembling in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The quiet house suddenly felt like a trap, every shadow a threat. I sank into the nearest chair, clutching the phone to my chest. Whoever they were, they knew my name, my number, my connection to Mark. And if Mark didn't pay them back soon, they might come for me next. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old farmhouse set my nerves on edge. The shadows stretched long across the walls, and even Henry's photograph, usually a comfort, seemed to watch me with worry. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I couldn't sit here waiting for the next call. I needed help. Not just legal help, protection.
When I walked back into Richard's office that morning, his secretary looked startled. "Mrs. Whitaker, you were just here yesterday."
I need to see him again. My voice was steadier than I felt.
Richard came out a few minutes later, surprised but welcoming. "Lorraine, come in."
I sat down across from him and clutched my purse in both hands. They called me, last night.
His expression darkened instantly. "Who?"
I don't know. A man. Said Mark owed them. Said time was running out. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going. "Richard, they knew my name. My number. They laughed when they hung up. What if they come for me?"
For a moment, Richard just studied me, his eyes filled with something that looked a lot like anger. But not at me. At the situation.
Richard said slowly. "Lorraine, you need to understand, if Mark's in debt to dangerous people, they'll see you as leverage. They'll think you're an easy target. You're not safe here."
The words settled over me like frost. Not safe. In my own home. In the house Henry had built with his own hands. Then what do I do?
Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We'll move quickly on the will, but more than that, you need to make arrangements. Do you have anywhere else you can go? A friend? A relative?"
I shook my head. Most of my friends had passed, and the few who hadn't were scattered across the country, too frail to take me in. Richard sighed.
"Then maybe you should consider a temporary place, somewhere secure, a retirement community even, just until we know how bad this is."
The suggestion stung. A retirement community? It felt like exile, like being tucked away where no one had to look at me.
But the phone call's echo still rang in my ears. The clock's ticking. I'll think about it.
Richard nodded, but I could see in his eyes he thought there wasn't much time to think. As I rose to leave, he placed a hand on mine.
"Lorraine, whatever you do, don't answer the phone again if it's them, and don't be alone at night."
I walked out of the office with my head high, but inside, fear churned in my stomach, because deep down, I already knew the truth. I was alone, and night was coming.
That evening, I brewed chamomile tea and set the mug on the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I stirred, the spoon clinking against the porcelain like a nervous heartbeat. The silence in the farmhouse had never felt so heavy. I checked the locks twice, then a third time. Every door bolted, every window latched. Still, I couldn't shake Richard's warning. Don't be alone at night. But who else did I have? The people who should have been here, the son I raised, the daughter-in-law I tolerated for his sake. They were the ones who left me stranded, like baggage no one claimed. I tried reading. I tried humming old hymns. Nothing worked. By midnight, I gave up and turned off the lamp, hoping exhaustion would finally drag me under, but then I heard it. A crunch of gravel outside the living room window. My breath caught. The farmhouse sat back from the road down a long drive. No one came this far by accident. I crept to the window, heart hammering. Through the Thor sea swam. I saw the faint glow of headlights, a car parked just beyond the gate, engine idling. I froze, listening. The low rumble of the motor carried in the night air. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the gravel toward the porch. I backed away, my pulse racing. My phone was on the kitchen table, 10 steps away, but it felt like a mile. The footsteps stopped just outside. A shadow shifted across the curtain. Someone was standing there, watching.
Mark owes us, old lady.
Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps retreated. Gravel crunched again. The car door slammed. Tires spat dirt as the vehicle sped back toward the road. And then, silence. I sank into a chair, shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone when I finally grabbed it. I thought about calling Richard. I thought about calling the police. But shame stopped me. What would I even say? That some faceless man threatened me because my grown son couldn't manage his life? No. Not tonight. Not yet. Instead, I whispered into the empty kitchen, "You won't break me." I wasn't sure if I was talking to the men outside or to Mark and Tanya. Either way, I meant it. By morning, the night felt almost like a dream, except for the tire tracks carved into the gravel by the gate. Proof I hadn't imagined it. I made myself a cup of coffee, though it tasted like ashes on my tongue, then dialed the sheriff's office. My voice shook as I explained what happened. The car outside, the man's voice through the window. The deputy who answered listened politely, but I could hear the disbelief.
Mrs. Whitaker, are you sure it wasn't just some kids? We get teenagers pulling pranks out there all the time.
Does a prankster tell a 78-year-old woman that her son owes them money? Does a prankster idle outside her house at midnight?
Look, we'll send a patrol car by tonight, okay? But unless they do more than stand outside, there's not much we can do. We'll send a car by.
That afternoon, Richard called to check on me. I told him what happened, how the sheriff's office had brushed me off like a confused old woman.
That's exactly why I warned you. They won't take this seriously until it's too late, which means we'll handle it ourselves. You have the right to protect your property, Lorraine. You have the right to protect yourself. If the law won't step in, then we make sure you're not defenseless.
Mark owes us, old lady.
Show me what to do. Richard met me that evening at the farmhouse. He wore no suit, just an old flannel and jeans, but he carried himself with the same authority he had in court. "You still have Henry's shotgun?" he asked after we sat at the kitchen table. I nodded. "In the hall closet. I haven't touched it since the funeral." "Time to touch it," he said simply. My fingers shook as I pulled the case from the closet. The gun felt heavier than I remembered. Maybe it was the years, maybe it was the grief. But when I laid it across the table, I saw not just a weapon, but a piece of Henry himself, his hands oiling the barrel, his voice reminding me to check the safety twice. Richard inspected it with practiced ease. "Still in good shape. You'll want to get comfortable with it again." "I'm 78, Richard," I said, half a laugh, half a sigh. "I don't know if I've got it in me." He leaned forward, meeting my eyes. "Lorraine, the people after Mark, they don't care how old you are. They care that you're alone. That makes you a target. The gun isn't about what you can or can't do. It's about reminding them you won't go quietly." The words settled into me like bricks, solid and undeniable. So we stepped out back into the cool Tennessee dusk. The fields stretched wide, crickets chirping in the tall grass. Richard set up a row of old tin cans along the fence. "Show me," he said. My first shot rang wild, nearly knocking me back. I grimaced, embarrassed, but Richard just nodded. Again. The second landed closer. The third, closer still. By the fifth, I hit a can square, the clang echoing across the fields. A strange warmth bloomed in my chest. Not pride, exactly, but something close. Proof I wasn't helpless. When we came back inside, Richard spread more papers across the table, legal documents, draft after draft of my revised will. He pointed out signatures, witnesses, clauses that sealed my wishes beyond Mark or Tanya's reach. I signed each page slowly, deliberately, like pressing my name into stone. When we were done, I closed the folder and looked at Richard. They thought I was weak. They thought I had nothing left. They're wrong. Richard gave a rare smile. Now you sound like Henry. I carried the shotgun back to its place by the door, and for the first time since Jake's funeral, the farmhouse didn't feel like a coffin. It felt like a fortress. 3 days later, their car rolled up the driveway like nothing had happened. A glossy SUV, polished clean, beach towels and shopping bags stuffed in the back. I watched from the kitchen window as Tanya stepped out first, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Mark followed, dragging his feet, carrying nothing but his phone. They looked untouched, sun-kissed, rested, glowing with vacation. Not the slightest trace of shame. "Mom!" Mark called as he walked up the porch steps. His voice carried that fake cheer I'd once mistaken for love. "We're back. Did you manage okay?" Did I manage? I opened the door but didn't step aside. I stood square in the frame, the shotgun propped against the wall just behind me. Not in my hands, but close enough they couldn't miss it. Tanya's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. She smiled, tight and cold. "Well, someone's been busy. You left me stranded in Nashville with no ticket home," I said evenly. "You took my money, my luggage, and walked away without a word." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it's not— Don't!" I snapped. The sound of my own voice startled me, firm, unyielding. "Don't you dare tell me it's not what it looks like, because it's exactly what it looks like." Tanya crossed her arms. "We did what we had to do. Flights aren't free, Lorraine. You've had decades to build savings, and you're sitting in a house that's practically falling apart. Maybe if you pitched in a little more instead of holding on to the past." I cut her off. "I pitched in. I sold Henry's pearls, his ring. I gave what little I had left because I believed I was part of this family. And you left me behind like trash at the airport." Mark finally looked at me then, and for the briefest second, guilt flickered in his eyes. But Tanya's hand touched his arm, anchoring him to her side. He said nothing. And in that silence, I understood everything. "You should know," I continued, my voice steady as stone. "Things have changed. My will is updated. My affairs are no longer your concern. And if either of you think you can walk back into this house and take more, you're mistaken." Tanya smirked. "You think a piece of paper will stop us?" "No," I said, glancing at the shotgun by the door. "But this will." For the first time, Tanya's mask slipped. A flash of unease crossed her face. Mark shifted again, pulling at his collar, not looking me in the eye. "Now," I said, stepping back just enough to gesture toward the driveway, "take your bags, take your lies, and get out." The words hung in the air, heavy as thunder, and though my knees trembled beneath my skirt, I didn't waver.
The air that night felt heavy, like the sky itself was pressing down. I sat in Henry's chair by the window, the shotgun resting across my lap. My heart was calm, steadier than it had been in weeks. Mark and Tanya had stormed out earlier, promising I'd regret this. I believed them, and yet I wasn't afraid, not anymore. Headlights swung across the fields around midnight, tires crunching gravel up the long driveway. I rose slowly, peering through the curtains. Not one car. Two. The first was Mark's SUV. The second was an unfamiliar black sedan, sleek and mean-looking. When the doors opened, the truth crystallized. Tanya stepped out, her heels clicking, her face hard as stone, and behind her, two men in dark jackets, strangers, but not the kind you mistake. Broad shoulders, scarred hands, predators, debt collectors. They walked side by side up to the porch, Tanya leading like a queen, bringing soldiers to a battlefield.
Lorraine, we should talk, don't be difficult.
I didn't answer. Instead, I slid the lock on the door and braced the shotgun against my shoulder.
We don't want trouble, ma'am. Just business. Your son owes more than he can pay, and well, debts roll downhill.
This house isn't his. The debt isn't mine. Mark appeared behind them, pale, sweating. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't look at the gun. He kept his eyes on the ground like a boy caught stealing.
She's got assets, land, furniture, jewelry. She's been holding out. She can cover this.
That true, ma'am?
This house is paid for. The deed is locked, and my lawyer has copies of everything. If I disappear, if so much as a lamp goes missing, your names are the first he'll hand the sheriff. There was a pause. The shorter man shifted uneasily, muttering something to the taller one.
You think paperwork and threats make you untouchable? You're an old woman clinging to dust, Lorraine. You'll die alone in this house, and nobody will remember you.
The words struck deep, but I didn't flinch. I raised the barrel of the shotgun, aiming it squarely at the door. My finger didn't tremble. Try me.
For a long moment the night held its breath. Then the taller man chuckled, low and sharp. She's got teeth, this one. Let's go. Too much heat here.
What? You're just going to walk away?
But they were already moving back toward the sedan, leaving her and Mark standing alone in the wash of headlights. Get off my porch, Tanya, and take your coward husband with you. This family ends tonight. Her face twisted, her mouth opening to spit venom. But for the first time I saw something flicker there. Not triumph, not rage, fear. She grabbed Mark's arm, pulling him toward the SUV. And just like that, the wolves scattered back into the dark. I stood in the doorway, the shotgun still warm in my hands, and knew the final chapter of this war had begun. The farmhouse was quiet again, but the silence didn't soothe me. It pressed on my chest like a weight. I kept the shotgun close, propped by Henry's chair, but my mind churned. I knew Tanya wasn't finished. Women like her don't accept defeat. They circle back, nastier each time. The storm came quicker than I expected. 2 nights later, as I sat knitting by the fire, the back door creaked open. Not the front, not the porch where decent folks enter. The back, like a thief. Tanya. Her perfume arrived before her voice, sharp, artificial.
You're stubborn, Lorraine, I'll give you that.
Breaking in now, that's trespassing.
Trespassing? Honey, half this house belongs to Mark, and what belongs to him belongs to me.
I turned then, meeting her eyes in the firelight. They gleamed with a kind of madness, the shine of someone who believed cruelty was a crown.
You think you've won because you scared a couple of collectors, but you're old. Time's on my side. You'll trip, you'll fall, you'll fade. And when you're gone, all of this will be ours anyway.
I didn't move, didn't blink. I let her keep walking closer and closer until she stood almost within reach. Henry warned me about you.
What?
He saw the way you looked at Mark, the way you looked at me. He wrote letters, sealed them up before he passed. Her smirk faltered, just slightly. They're in Richard's hands now. If anything happens to me, if so much as a teacup breaks in this house, those letters go straight to the police, the bank, the court. Every word Henry suspected about you, every warning he left for me, it all becomes public. Try me. The fire popped, throwing sparks, and for a heartbeat Tanya looked like a witch caught in her own flames. She clenched her fists, but something in her eyes shifted. Rage gave way to calculation. Then, slowly, she stepped back.
This isn't over. You can't live forever, Lorraine.
She turned and vanished into the dark, the back door slamming behind her. I sat still for a long time, the fire crackling low, my hands trembling now that she was gone. Then I rose, took Henry's box from the mantel and pressed it to my chest. She was right about one thing. I couldn't live forever. But I didn't need forever. I only needed one more night strong enough to end this war on my terms. The morning came sharp and clear, the kind of Tennessee dawn that painted the sky pink and gold. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of weak coffee, Henry's box beside me. My body felt tired, heavier than it had in years, but my mind was sharper than ever. It's done, filed with the county clerk, witnessed, notarized, ironclad. I reached for the folder, but he shook his head. No need. Trust me, Mark and Tanya can't touch a dime. When you pass, everything goes to the Veterans Hospital and the Scholarship Fund, just like you asked. They'll get nothing. Relief washed over me like rain on dry earth. For the first time in months, I breathed easy. By afternoon, the storm hit. Tanya and Mark barged in without knocking, fury blazing. What did you do? You gave it all away to strangers, not strangers, to people who need it more than you ever did. Mark looked pale, broken. He didn't speak. Tanya did enough for both. You vindictive hag! You think you can erase us? You think anyone will even remember you after this? No, Tanya, I don't need to be remembered. I just need to make sure you are. She froze, confusion flickering. I pointed to the box on the mantel. Henry's letters. Every one of them is in Richard's hands. Every ugly truth about you, every warning. And if you so much as contest my will, those letters become public record. Your name will rot long before mine. For the first time since I'd known her, Tanya was speechless, her face drained of colour. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then turned on her heel and stormed out. I'm sorry, Mum. You're sorry now. But sorry doesn't sew a wound shut. He lowered his head and followed Tanya out the door. When the silence returned, I eased back into Henry's chair. The shotgun leaned by the door, untouched. The house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had sighed with relief. I picked up Henry's box one last time, opened it, and pulled out the final letter. The ink had faded, but his words were clear. If you're reading this, Lorraine, it means you stood your ground. You never were as fragile as you thought. I always knew you'd be the one to end it. Tears blurred the page, but I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. That night I sat by the fire until my eyelids grew heavy. I closed Henry's box, set it on the mantel, and let the warmth carry me into sleep. And when morning came, the house stood silent, strong, unbroken, filled not with defeat, but with the quiet triumph of a woman who refused to be erased.